Employee data is valuable business data. Businesses care about it, so we want to protect it. And we care about employees as human beings, right? To protect them against things like identity theft.
Hello from the Workforce Newsroom. I'm Meg Ferrero. Today we're talking about protecting your data in this evolving world of work. With me are ADP Global Chief Privacy Officer Jason Albert, Vice President Compliance Programs and Government Affairs Dan Lewis, and joining us from Alpharetta, Senior Director of Compliance and Security Molly Mantia. Thank you all for being here. Jason, I'm going to start with you. What trends are you seeing right now with employee privacy?
Well, we're seeing increased regulation, right? Most notably in California with the California Privacy Rights Act, which covers employees, but we're also seeing regulation around use of surveillance tools in the workplace. And this isn't surprising, right? Employee data is valuable business data. Businesses care about it, so we want to protect it. And we care about employees as human beings, right? To protect them against things like identity theft. And so we're seeing with these regulations and with company practices an increased trend towards data minimization, towards using the least amount of data needed to be able to process employee data, to be able to evaluate them, to be able to do all those types of things. And so that's really the trend that we're seeing.
I think as employees we can all appreciate that. So Dan, are you seeing any examples in connection with what Jason was saying around data minimization?
ADP in our processes and controls makes every effort to minimize the use of client employee social security numbers in the documents that we issue and deliver. And we've seen challenges at a state level where states are insisting on employers providing W-2s and 1099s with full social security numbers for their client employees. We think that this could create risks of data protection and data privacy, as well as going against the standards of data minimization that Jason had just pointed out to us. It's also confusing and complex for our clients when there are different rules and regulations at a federal and at state levels, varying state to state. We think that the best approach would be a consistent regulatory approach where data minimization is respected.
Agreed. So why did ADP make the decision to start truncating social security numbers on Forms W-2?
In 2020, the IRS issued regulations under the 2015 PATH Act, the Protecting Against Tax Hikes Act, and in that act, the IRS permitted truncation of social security numbers on W-2s and 1099s. Following that IRS guidance, ADP started truncating social security numbers for client employees on W-2s. We do still issue employer-reported W-2s that are issued to state and federal agencies with full social security numbers, so the states do have access to the information that they need to carry out audits and to collect taxes properly. So we don't think that they need this additional information.
As we look around, Molly, we're seeing that there are a lot of examples beyond even employers where organizations are taking the opportunity to truncate sensitive data, things like airlines truncating frequent flyer numbers or credit card companies truncating credit card numbers on receipts. So to that end, from a business perspective, what are you seeing employers do to protect business confidentiality?
Yeah, thanks so much for the question, Meg. I think we all would agree that business confidentiality is critically important as stewards of our clients' data. If you collect data, you have to make sure that you're treating it as you would treat your own. What we've seen is a major shift. I think we all remember in the 90s, early 2000s, where companies would collect anything and everything. They're like, oh, I may need this down the road. Let me get that now. And what we're really seeing is a shift to make sure we're minimizing risk by only collecting the data that we need to complete the transaction or to complete the process. Well, I always say there's 4 questions we should be asking ourselves at the end of the day when we talk about data and how we collect it and how we make sure we minimize what we get. The first, do I have the data I need to have a successful transaction, right? And successful can be really put into the bucket of, is the data what I need, and can I get it done, and is it private? Are we making sure that we're keeping that in mind? The second question would be, can any of this be minimized or redacted, which is what you mentioned earlier that we see from the airlines. The third, who has access to the data? Who on your teams is actually looking at it? There are different circumstances where someone may need to see some data that others may not in order to get the job or the task at hand done. The fourth is, do I have the right training in place? So that way my teams know how to interact with the data and what they should be doing with the data to make sure we are keeping it private and secure.
That's great. I think those are 4 key questions to ask for any employer thinking about what they're going to do with their data, I guess really, or any business. So Jason, if you think about it, then what are the risks of not getting this right?
Well, as I was saying, right, it's important to protect this data. It's valuable company data. It's valuable to the employees. But again, like we see these types of issues where this type of data gets out. And so one of the advantages of truncating Social Security numbers, for example, and otherwise engaging in data minimization is that it makes it harder for people to get the information they need to impersonate or commit identity theft against someone else. And so that is important for employee security, for protecting their financial assets. And so getting this right is really, really important to make sure that as we process data for legitimate needs, that bad actors really can't get a hand on it.
And Molly, what do you think? What are the risks of not getting it right from a business perspective?
Yeah, I think the first major risk is going to be the trust, right? So there's the old adage, treat others how you want to be treated. Treat others' data as how you want your data to be treated. It goes hand in hand. When employees hand over that information, they explicitly assume that we will take care of it. So if anything should happen, it's breaking that trust that everyone has worked so hard to maintain. Employees trust us to make sure their data is secure.
See something, say something.
Absolutely.
So how often have we heard that? So Dan, there's so much going on. How is ADP staying on top of all of these changes, whether they're statutory, regulatory? What are we doing to stay on top of it?
Yeah, there definitely is a lot going on, so you're certainly right there. I would start by saying I think it's important that our clients are aligned with trusted partners, and anybody in the business community is aligned with trusted partners that are able to support them in these challenging times in terms of fast and complex regulatory developments. ADP, as one of those trusted partners, has a very robust and comprehensive infrastructure in place where we're able to track and understand complex regulations at a federal and state level, understand how they work together, and understand where there are issues that need to be addressed. With my favorite example of Social Security truncation and the importance of that, ADP recognizes the disconnect between the federal guidance and the call for the truncation of Social Security numbers and what's happening at state level in many states. And so we're able to connect the dots in terms of those challenges and make sure we're engaging the right stakeholders.
That's great.
And I would chime in and say, we have the example around Social Security number truncation, which is important, but it's also about communicating with state agencies and others. We want to make sure there's secure means of communication, that we aren't using email, to make sure that that information is protected, that it can't be intercepted, that it goes to the right person, that the right information ends up with the right agency. And having a partnership and enabling that type of secure communication also is really, really important.
Yeah, so I'm hearing communication is key, as usual. I think that's true in pretty much every part of life. So let's talk future trends. So what do you all foresee? I'm going to kind of hand it over to all 3 of you. We'll start with Jason, but what do you foresee impacting workplace data protections as the future of work evolves?
Well, I think at the state level, we're going to see continued increased regulation, right? And then I think you're going to see increased adoption of privacy-enhancing technologies to achieve that data minimization, even with the dawning of artificial intelligence, while at the same time protecting that employee privacy to make sure that the minimum amount of data is needed to, obtain those insights and to prevent, problematic outcomes.
Dan?
Yeah, well said. Look, I think it's well reported in terms of the priorities for deregulation at a federal level, so we're seeing that in a lot of instances. I don't see that as a focus area for privacy and security. I think that the importance of that will be status quo. I think we are going to see the states taking a lead role in making determinations on best practices for data privacy, data minimization, et cetera. And so that could lead to a varied landscape at a state level. We'll have to stay on top of that and make sure that ADP and our clients are compliant across all 50 states.
Complexity. Molly, what do you think? What do you see as trends?
Yeah, my colleagues really summed it up great. So the one thing that I would just echo on and want to add to that, it's really the voice of the employee. It's so easy now for people to express their wishes, to express their concerns, and really reach out to the different companies who have their data. With the way that AI is changing the world today, ultimately, I think that the biggest trend is going to be what the employee wants, what their expectations are, and how that morphs over time.
I think you summed it up perfectly, keeping their interests and as well as the company's interests front of mind and making sure that we're minimizing what we can and doing right by everyone. And thank you, Jason. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Molly. Really great for you to be here. Appreciate it. And thank you for joining us. For more insights, head to adp.com/EyeOnWashington.